can't believe I did it. I crossed a line I can't undo. The moment was real, forbidden, and it changed everything. One decision, and there's no going back. I had always been drawn to the strange and the beautiful, the kind of people who seemed to walk on the edge of normal life, brushing against danger without a hint of fear. That night at the gala, I'd reluctantly agreed to attend with a friend. I found myself staring at a man who seemed to exist in a world of his own making. He stood near the grand staircase, his posture impossibly straight, but there was something fluid in the way he moved, like a shadow stretching just beyond the reach of light. My pulse picked up without warning, a subtle thrum of anticipation and unease I could neither explain nor resist. When our eyes met, I felt a peculiar pull, a strange electricity that ran down my spine and settled in the pit of my stomach. He smiled, slowly, deliberately, and I realized it was a smile that could charm and unsettle at once. He crossed the room effortlessly, each step measured, deliberate, as if he were gliding rather than walking. "You look different," he said when he stopped in front of me, his voice smooth and low, like warm honey pouring over something sharp. "Different in a way I can't forget." I laughed nervously, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" My voice sounded small even to me. His gaze lingered, and I felt exposed, stripped of all pretense, though I didn't want to look away. "It's an observation," he said softly, "and I rarely forget what I observe." There was something almost predatory in the way he said it, but the thrill of it made my cheeks flush. We moved to a quieter corner of the ballroom. The crowd around us faded into a blur of glimmering dresses and murmured conversations. I learned that his name was Elias, and with every word he spoke, I felt as though the air between us was charged, taut with unspoken secrets. He listened more than he spoke, but when he did speak, it was as if each sentence had been carefully chosen to draw me closer, to hold me in some magnetic orbit I didn't know I wanted. I found myself laughing at small things I normally wouldn't, telling him secrets that should have remained hidden even to my closest friends. There was something in his presence that made honesty irresistible and terrifying all at once. Yet, beneath the charm, a shadow lingered. There were moments when his expression would harden for just a heartbeat, cold, almost inhuman, and I shivered involuntarily. Sometimes his eyes would flicker toward the darker corners of the room, scanning, calculating. I tried to rationalize it. Perhaps he was simply observant, attentive, maybe even a little eccentric. But my instincts whispered otherwise, and for reasons I couldn't explain, I found myself leaning into that unease rather than away from it. Later, as the evening waned and the orchestra's music softened into something slower, heavier, he offered his arm, and I accepted it without thinking. Outside, the rain had begun to fall, slicking the streets with silver reflections. He led me through the empty avenues, the city lights casting distorted shadows that danced around us like restless spirits. "I feel alive with you," he murmured at one point, brushing his fingers lightly against mine. The touch was electric, sending a shiver up my arm, but there was an underlying chill I couldn't ignore. It was as though his warmth carried its own darkness. We stopped under the awning of a small cafe, the rain pelting down in rhythmic drumming. I laughed at the absurdity of being soaked. But he didn't laugh. He just looked at me, his head tilted slightly, and I felt my heartbeat trip over itself. "I haven't met anyone like you before," he said. There was intensity in his gaze, a hunger that made my stomach twist. "And I don't usually pursue people." My chest tightened. There was a warning there, wrapped in silk, but I wanted to ignore it. I should have left then. I should have walked into the rain and disappeared into the night, but I didn't. Instead, I let him walk me back to my apartment, talking in low tones that made me lean closer without realizing it. He paused at my door, the world outside slick with rain and darkness, and looked at me as if he could see every secret I had ever kept, every fear I had ever hidden. "May I see you again?" he asked softly. There was no urgency, no need, just a quiet certainty that unsettled me more than any shout or demand ever could. I nodded before I could stop myself, feeling a mix of exhilaration and dread. As I closed the door behind him and leaned against it, my hand trembling slightly, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just invited something into my life I would never be able to undo. Even now, thinking back, I can remember the faint, almost imperceptible chill that lingered on his skin, like a warning I didn't fully understand. That night, I didn't just meet a man. I met a storm cloaked in human form, and I was already caught in its pull. The days after that first encounter with Elias passed in a dizzy blur. I kept thinking about him constantly, about the way his dark eyes seemed to pull secrets from my soul without a word, the way his touch left a trail of warmth and something colder I couldn't name. I told myself it was infatuation, the kind that made young women reckless and hearts race for no good reason, but deep down, I sensed that this was something different, something dangerous. Something that whispered to me in the quiet moments when I was alone. He appeared in my life as though he had always been meant to. Dinner dates under dimly lit restaurants, walks through empty parks at night where the city lights made shadows twist unnaturally, and long silent car rides where I would glance at him and catch his reflection in the window, eyes unnervingly intense. He asked questions I wasn't prepared to answer, questions about fear and desire, about the things I had never spoken aloud even to myself, and yet I answered, revealing pieces of myself I hadn't meant to show anyone. Sometimes I would wake from dreams drenched in sweat, the echo of his voice lingering in my ears, soft and persuasive, urging me closer, urging me to let go of the caution that had always kept me safe. I told myself it was imagination, that the shadowy corners of my apartment and the flicker of candlelight were just my mind playing tricks. But when I saw the faint bruises forming on my wrist after a late-night embrace, perfectly circular and cold to the touch, I knew something about him was not right. And yet, I couldn't stop myself. One evening, he invited me to his apartment, a place that seemed almost frozen in time. Heavy curtains blocked the sunlight, and the faint scent of old wood and something faintly metallic lingered in the air. He offered me wine, dark and red, almost black in the dim light. As I sipped, the world seemed to tilt and the edges of my vision blurred. He watched me unblinking as though he were measuring not just my body but my soul. "You're different," he murmured, voice low, silk over steel. "You aren't afraid the way others are." That intrigues me. I should have felt fear then, a visceral scream in my chest, but I only felt curiosity and a dangerous, almost shameful thrill. Night after night, the intimacy grew. His hands, cold in a way that shouldn't have been possible, traced patterns on my skin that left goosebumps in their wake. Our kisses were fierce, intoxicating, like tasting both warmth and the edge of frost. Yet always, there was something off. A sudden stillness in his gaze, a shadow that moved across the room when no one was there, a whisper too low to hear, yet somehow felt in my bones. I began seeing glimpses of death in the corners of his apartment. Dark stains on the floor that vanished when I blinked, the faint echo of footsteps that didn't belong to either of us. I tried to rationalize it all. Perhaps he was just eccentric, obsessive, meticulous, but then there were the times he would vanish for hours during the night. I would wake to find him gone, only to see the window slightly ajar and the faint imprint of blood, or was it a shadow, on the sill. And each time, he returned as though nothing had happened, the warmth of his body pressing against mine, masking the chill beneath. It wasn't just his habits that unsettled me. It was the way he spoke about life and death. Casual, almost bored, yet precise. "Death," he said one evening as we lay entangled on the couch, "isn't to be feared. It's simply..." Another step. I shivered, pretending to laugh, but his words burrowed deep into my chest. There was a confidence in him, a certainty that made me feel both dangerously safe and dangerously exposed. Then came the night of the storm. Thunder rattled the windows and the city seemed to dissolve into black water under the rain. He held me close, his hands colder than I remembered, and whispered against my ear, "I need you to trust me completely." The words were a command, gentle yet impossible to resist. I nodded, heart pounding, though a voice in my head screamed at me to run. But something, desire, fascination, or madness kept me rooted in his arms. As lightning illuminated the room, I saw him in a way I hadn't before. His eyes gleamed unnaturally, catching the light like twin embers. His fangs, subtle yet unmistakable, peeked from behind his lips when he smiled, and a shiver ran down my spine, not from fear, not entirely, but from the magnetic pull he exerted over me. I tried to look away, tried to convince myself it was a trick of the light, but his gaze held mine, anchoring me in place. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My voice had abandoned me, leaving only a breathless acknowledgement that something had changed irreversibly. He leaned in, and the warmth of his body pressed against mine, simultaneously intoxicating and horrifying. I felt the thrill of knowing that this man, this monster, could destroy me, or maybe even give me a taste of something forbidden and eternal. By the time the storm had passed, I was no longer sure which part of him was human and which part was something darker. The line between desire and dread blurred completely, and though I had felt unease before, now it had solidified into an undeniable truth. I had stepped into a world I could not leave, and I never thought this would be just the beginning. The days after the storm were heavy, thick with a sense of expectation that I couldn't name. I found myself thinking about Ulysses constantly, about the faint gleam of his fangs in the lightning, the unnerving calm in his eyes as if he had seen centuries of life and death and found both amusing. My friends noticed my obsession, though none dared ask questions. Their concern felt almost trivial in the face of the strange, consuming pull he had over me. He invited me to his home again, insisting I stay for dinner. It was an old mansion, hidden in the shadows of tall, twisted trees, its windows staring blankly at the darkening sky like dead eyes. As soon as I stepped inside, a chill settled over me, seeping through my coat and into my bones. The house smelled faintly of damp wood and iron, like a tomb long forgotten. Yet despite the cold and shadow, he was there, smiling, offering me wine from a crystal decanter that glinted unnaturally in the dim light. "Do you feel it?" he asked softly as I followed him through the dark hallways. "The way the house watches you." I laughed nervously, though the laugh sounded hollow even to me. "I think you might be imagining things." "Am I?" His gaze lingered too long and the smile on his lips didn't reach his eyes. There was a sharpness there, a predator's focus, and I suddenly remembered the strange bruises on my wrist, the cold that lingered under his touch, the vanishings during the storm. My heart raced, and yet I could not move away. Something held me there, tethered by fear and fascination in equal measure. Dinner was quiet, the kind of silence that pressed against your ears, making you hyper-aware of every subtle sound. The scrape of a knife against a plate, the faint whisper of wind through the cracked window, the slow drip of water somewhere deep in the mansion. He served meat that smelled faintly metallic, almost off, but I didn't ask questions. I couldn't. The thought of offending him felt dangerous, as though angering him might awaken something I did not want to see. After dinner, we moved to the library, a cavernous room lined with towering shelves, shadows pulling in every corner. He sat close, and the warmth of his body pressed against mine, colder than it should have been. I tried to concentrate on the books, pretending I was reading, but I could hear his heartbeat, or maybe it was something else, steady and unnervingly calm. Then the whispers began. At first, faint like the rustling of pages or the hum of the old chandelier, but they grew louder, curling around the room, and I could swear they were calling my name. My pulse hammered in my ears. I turned, and the shadows seemed to shift, stretching toward us like living fingers. "Do you hear them?" I whispered, my voice trembling. He tilted his head, expression unreadable. "Hear what?" The voices. "I think they're in the walls." He leaned close, his lips brushing my ear, cold enough to make me shiver. "They're not in the walls, my love," he murmured. "They're in you." I froze, the words sinking like a stone in my chest. I wanted to pull away, to run, but the room seemed to constrict around me, shadows crawling closer, the air thick with a faint metallic scent that made my stomach churn. He held my hands in his, icy fingers wrapping around mine, and I felt an electric surge, almost like the pull of a tide I couldn't resist. Then came the first scream. It wasn't human, not entirely. It was something between a shriek and a gurgle, rising from deep within the house. The chandelier swayed violently, though the air was still, and a dark shape flickered in the corner of my vision. I turned, heart slamming, and saw a figure crouched low, eyes glinting like black coals, dripping something dark onto the polished floor. Elias's expression didn't change. He simply whispered, "Stay calm. It's only the house reminding you that it belongs to me." My knees nearly gave out, and I clutched at him, terrified, nauseated, and inexplicably entranced. The figure moved with unnatural speed, vanishing into the shadows, and for a moment I questioned my sanity. But the metallic smell lingered, thick and real. I could taste iron on my tongue. Something had lived here, breathed here, fed here, and now it had chosen me as witness. I tried to speak, to demand answers, but my voice caught in my throat. Instead, I felt his hand brush my hair aside, his breath cool against my ear. "You don't need to understand everything," he said softly. "You only need to trust me. Trust me. And you'll see things no one else can." I wanted to protest, to push him away. But the warmth of his body, the magnetic pull of his gaze, was impossible to resist. I realized with a sinking feeling that I had already crossed a line from which there was no return. The mansion, the shadows, the whispers, they were all part of his world, and by stepping inside, I had invited myself into a nightmare that was as intoxicating as it was horrifying. He leaned back slightly, smiling, and for a moment he looked almost normal again. But then his eyes glinted with that same unnerving intensity, and I noticed the faint curve of his fangs again. My stomach dropped. I don't know if I can. You can, he said, cutting me off gently but firmly. You've already begun. And in that moment, I understood. This was no ordinary romance. This was a descent, a slow, deliberate pull into darkness. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was rooted, knowing that the night had only just begun and that every step deeper would drag me further into a world I wasn't prepared for. A world where desire and death intertwined so seamlessly that the line between fear and pleasure was gone. I never thought falling for him could feel like walking straight into a nightmare, but as I looked at him, I realized this was only the beginning. The night I truly saw him for what he was began like any other, yet I should have known that any night with Elias could unravel the world around me. The mansion was silent, the air thick with that metallic tang I had learned to recognize but never grow accustomed to. Candlelight flickered against the walls, casting long trembling shadows, and I felt as though the darkness itself was leaning closer, watching, waiting. He appeared from the library doorway, movement fluid and unnaturally quiet like water sliding over stone. The moment he stepped into the candlelight, I froze. His eyes glowed faintly, not the warm gleam of a human gaze, but something older, sharper, infinite. My heart pounded, yet I could not move. There was a pull in the air, a weight that pressed against my chest, as though the room itself recognized his presence and bowed to it. Elias, I whispered, my voice trembling, and for the first time I saw a flicker of amusement cross his expression. You can say it, he murmured, voice low and soft, yet each word vibrated through me, resonating with a power I could feel in my bones. You can call me what I am. Or at least, feel it. The temperature dropped. I wrapped my arms around myself, shivering despite the layers of clothing, the firelight failing to penetrate the sudden chill. My pulse raced, yet some dark, irrational part of me was enthralled. I could feel it before I saw it, the aura, thick and suffocating, radiating off him like venomous perfume. It was the scent of danger, of hunger, of death, yet somehow intoxicating. He moved closer, and I could feel the pull in the air around us, a magnetic force that bent reality slightly, twisting the shadows at our feet into shapes that seemed almost alive. The walls of the mansion creaked as though the house itself were breathing in tandem with him, and I stumbled back a step, heart hammering. Do you feel it? He asked, almost amused, his lips grazing my ear. Do you feel what you've invited into your life? Yes, I breathed, unable to tear my eyes from him. I feel it. He smiled, and that smile was different from the charming grin I had first fallen for. It was sharp, dangerous, and utterly primal. His teeth were sharper now, the faint fangs unmistakable, and his eyes glinted with a hunger that made my stomach twist. I wanted to look away, but my gaze was trapped, drawn into the abyss of his aura. Without warning, the shadows in the corners of the room writhed and stretched, moving as though they were extensions of him. The chandelier swayed violently, casting fractured reflections that danced across the walls, and I heard whispers, not human, not words I could understand, but voices that promised pain, seduction, and eternity all at once. Elias extended a hand, and I felt the cold of his skin before he touched me. The moment his fingers brushed mine, it was as if a current of ice and fire shot through my body, numbing and igniting every nerve at once. My knees buckled slightly, and I swayed against him, helpless. This is you, I whispered, awe and terror mingling in my voice. Yes, he said softly, and the sound was velvet over steel. This is who I am. And now, you will see. He leaned closer, and I could feel the aura radiating from him, pressing against me, almost tangible, a presence so alive it made the air shimmer. It was suffocating and exhilarating, a warning and an invitation all at once. My vision blurred at the edges, reality bending around him, and I realized I was standing on the precipice of something I could never undo. Then I saw it, a shadow crawling along the floor toward me, separate from his body, yet undeniably connected. It hissed a sound that made my teeth ache, and I could feel the faint pressure of it brushing against my legs, cold and slick. Elias merely watched, expression serene, almost tender, as if observing a pet he had trained for centuries. I stumbled back, tripping over the thick rug, and my breath caught, He bent down, and for a moment I thought he would hurt me, but instead he pressed a finger to my lips. "You cannot fear me," he whispered. "Not yet. You can only feel," and I did. Every nerve in my body screamed with terror. Every instinct begged me to flee, yet my heart hammered with a perverse, unshakable fascination. He was not human. Not entirely. He was predator, shadow, hunger, and eternity wrapped into one being, and I was mesmerized. The shadows retreated slightly, curling back into the corners of the room, but the aura remained, thick and pulsing. Like a living thing, suffocating and intoxicating all at once. I could feel the weight of centuries pressing down on me, the echo of deaths long past, the faint rustle of victims long consumed. And in the center of it all, he smiled down at me, fangs glinting faintly in the candlelight. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. And yet I stayed, knowing I could not leave, not entirely. My body was caught between fear and desire, my mind tethered to a darkness I had willingly invited into my life. He leaned closer, whispering against my ear, and I felt it, the pull, the draw, the undeniable truth. "You belong here," he murmured, "with me." I swallowed hard, every instinct screaming in warning, but I realized I had already crossed the line, and as the shadows began to stir again, whispering promises of things I could not yet name, I understood fully, terrifyingly, that my life had changed forever. I had married a monster, and tonight I would truly see the darkness I had stepped into. The night was alive with shadows, every corner of the mansion crawling with a presence I could feel pressing against my skin. Elias stood at the center of it all, a dark, commanding figure whose aura seemed to bend the very air around him. I had followed him deeper into this nightmare willingly, and now I understood the price of that choice. He moved with the same unnatural grace I had seen before, eyes gleaming in the dim candlelight. The shadows whispered, curling toward him like obedient servants, and I realized with a sinking heart that this world, this darkness, was his, and I had stepped fully inside. "Stay close," he murmured, voice velvet over steel, and I obeyed without thinking. There was no fear strong enough to push me away. I was trapped, magnetized by something older and hungrier than life itself. My chest tightened as I felt the pulse of his aura, thick and suffocating, every beat of it resonating with a primal hunger that made my knees weak. Then it happened. The room seemed to warp, the walls stretching impossibly as the shadows began to writhe violently. Figures emerged from the darkness, indistinct, horrifying silhouettes of the lives he had taken, or perhaps the echoes of deaths long past. I tried to step back, but he was there instantly, hand on my wrist, anchoring me in place. "Do you see now?" he whispered, leaning close. His breath was icy, brushing my cheek, sending shivers down my spine. "Do you feel the weight of what you've joined?" I nodded, breathless, terrified, and strangely exhilarated. Yes, I felt it. The raw, unflinching reality of death, of hunger, of centuries pressing down around us, yet beneath it all, a dark intimacy I could not deny. My pulse raced not just from fear but from the undeniable magnetism of him. The line between dread and desire had dissolved completely. He stepped back slightly, and I caught the faint glint of his fangs again, sharper than I had remembered, a cruel promise lingering in the air. The shadows shifted closer as if sensing my hesitation, and I realized that I was no longer merely a spectator. I was a participant, tethered to him, bound by something I had invited willingly. "You understand," he said softly, "that there is no turning back." I swallowed hard. The weight of it all pressed against me, the lives, the darkness, the allure, and yet I could not bring myself to step away. My body, my mind, even my very soul seemed caught in the pull of him, intoxicated by a terror that thrilled me as much as it terrified me. The mansion seemed to hum around us, the whispers of the dead growing louder, blending with the beat of my own heart. I could see the faint outline of a room beyond, walls slick with shadow, and I knew, somehow, that if I stepped forward, there would be no return, and I did step forward. The moment I crossed that threshold, I felt it, a full, unrelenting rush of power and darkness, a sensation that left me trembling, exhilarated, and sick with fear all at once. Elias's presence enveloped me completely, every nerve ending alight with his aura, and I understood terrifyingly what it meant to fall so fully into someone's world, to surrender to a being I was never meant to love. The shadows ebbed slightly, curling back into the corners of the room, but the weight of his presence remained, constant and unyielding. I could feel it in my chest, in my skin, in the very air I breathed, a dark, intoxicating truth. He smiled, faint and dangerous, and for the first time, I allowed myself to meet his gaze fully, seeing not just the monster, but the man who had drawn me into this inevitable spiral. There was love there, in some twisted form, but it was entangled irrevocably with hunger, danger, and eternity. I wanted to ask questions, to plead for answers, to understand what we had become, but my voice had vanished under the weight of the moment. All I could do was stand there, heart racing, soul trembling, knowing that I had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Even as I shivered under the intensity of him, part of me wanted more. Part of me craved the danger, the dark intimacy, the forbidden pull that had ensnared me from the very beginning. And yet, another part of me recoiled in horror, recognizing the peril I had invited, the lives, both his and others, that now haunted me forever. I looked at him, and he looked back, both of us aware that the line between predator and willing prey had vanished. The mansion was silent again, the shadows retreating but leaving a lingering echo of something ancient, something hungry. I had stepped into a world I could never leave, and yet I had not regretted it entirely. I had crossed a line, forbidden, dangerous, irreversible, and now, standing in the heavy, metallic, scented air of the mansion, I couldn't stop asking myself, what are we now? I never imagined I'd fall so completely, so recklessly, for someone I wasn't meant to love. Part of me still trembles in fear, yet another part aches with desire I can't deny. Crossing that line has changed everything. I'm no longer just me, and he's no longer just him. We are something else, something darker, something dangerous. And now, I wonder, what are we now? Share your thoughts. Would you have dared to cross that line too? Comment below and tell me what you think happened next.